Hello, my name is Warren Peach. I'm the Director of Operations for the Texas Flying Legends Museum, and I'd like to welcome you here today. Appreciate your visit. This is a Japanese Mitsubishi-designed A6M2-21 Zero. This particular airplane was built by Nakajima in January of 1942, only 1 month after Pearl Harbor. This is the same type airplane that was used against us at Pearl Harbor on December 7th of 1941, and is the oldest existing flying Zero of just a handful of Zeros flying in the world. It's one of the rarest airplanes out there and is the rarest one of the Texas Flying Legends Museum. This airplane saw combat during World War II in the Solomon Islands and was recovered in the mid-60s from an island called Balaele, just 11 miles south of Bougainville. It most likely saw combat against Corsairs from the Black Sheep Squadron, and it was a fierce fighter in its day. Designed shortly before World War II, the Zero almost had mythical qualities about it because of its ability to have extremely long range and extreme maneuverability that the Allies didn't fully understand at the beginning of the war. The understanding of the Zero came when one was lost during a battle in the Aleutian Islands and recovered by the U.S. forces. They took that airplane back, made it flyable, and in the test flying, found out what its weaknesses and strengths were, and from that were able to tell all the Allied pilots how to avoid being shot down by a Zero and how to shoot a Zero down. They were told that the Zero, although very maneuverable, became very heavy on the controls above 200 miles an hour, so their instructions were to dive to over 200 miles an hour and turn away from the Zero, climb back up and come back and re-attack the Zero. That same technique had been developed by General Chennault with the Flying Tigers in China and was an effective defense against the Zero. Once that was learned, the Zero's effectiveness was greatly diminished. Zeros became famous later on in the war as kamikaze airplanes. Although many airplanes were used for kamikazes by the Japanese, the Zero seemed to be the one most famous for it, probably because there were more of them produced than the others. Kamikaze attacks were suicide attacks on ships and Allied installations. That was towards the end of the war, and another thing the airplane was made famous for. The little folding wingtips you see on the end of the airplane were simply to make it fit on the elevator of the aircraft carrier so they could get them below decks. Texas Flying Legends Museum had named their Zero the Last Samurai because of the training and the mindset of the Zero for the Japanese. The airplane is extremely light, which is why it is as maneuverable and as good a performance as it has. And that was a conscious decision by the Japanese military that instead of having armor and self-sealing fuel tanks and big guns, they would prefer to have a very light maneuverable airplane, more of a sword, not a shield concept. It worked very well for them at the beginning of the war in China and against the U.S. for the first couple of years. But once we developed a new way to fight them, not having armor and not having self-sealing tanks really backfired on them because they lost all of their very well-trained pilots that had the samurai mindset, and as they were training new pilots in, those guys didn't really have more than one chance. It seemed like if they got hit, they were done. So they didn't have a chance to learn how to be good fighter pilots, and that's when the U.S., we outbuilt them, outtrained them, and outfought them. And that was a big part of why we won the war, was our airplanes were strong, and they were repairable, and they brought our pilots back so that experience was gained on each of those missions that they could come back and know more to go fight.